welcome again to this next video about Amazon CodeCatalyst blueprints and especially custom blueprints. And today we're going to start not within CodeCatalyst, but start with a little bit of a diagram. For me, if I want to talk about blueprint and if I want to explain what a blueprint actually is, this starts with visualizing what the contents of a blueprint are. You can see that on this diagram over here. I'm going to quickly walk you through the components of a blueprint that you build is on the one side. What is the master blueprint that this is dependent on? There's always one. A blueprint never starts kind of from scratch. At least I've not really seen that. There might be a possibility to do that, but I would advise against it. You should always start from a master blueprint. By default, this is going to be the blueprint builder, the custom blueprint builder that actually the CodeCatalyst team provides to you. And you can see that if you go to one of your blueprints, that custom blueprints that you have been building, if you go to the blueprints on the left hand side, you will now see that there is always a blueprint named Blueprint Builder with the author Amazon CodeCatalyst, and that has a specific version. This is important to keep in mind. You shouldn't start from scratch. Always start with an existing blueprint. Now, the blueprint can then build up for you project configuration, any kind of. This includes environments, setting up dev environments, setting up workspaces, maybe also going forward setting up packages and stuff like that, and all of the details that are required to make your project kind of live. It also includes generating source code repositories, and this can be multiple ones as well. And as part of that, and I've pulled that out because this is pretty important, you can also generate workflows within those source code repositories. So you can predefine on what a project is going to look like from a workflows perspective. When generating source repositories, you can also generate code, and this is really cool because you're not limited to the amount and the style of code that you're actually generating. Custom blueprints use TypeScript today, and I don't think that we need anything else but TypeScript to generate code, but you can generate any kind of code. So I've been using this one to generate TypeScript code, as well as generate Flutter code, as well as just generate JSON files that I'm potentially going to use later. With that, this is what a blueprint can do. What you need to keep in mind is that the more you do in a blueprint, the more complex the blueprint code itself will be. Now, that might be difficult to understand, right? The more things that you do in building up your project structure, the harder it will be to actually find errors in the blueprint generation or the execution of it. So with my experiences of starting to work on blueprints and building my own one, I think I kind of try to make the blueprints smaller if possible. And this means that you can have a use case of having a blueprint that only sets up the project configuration. So this means a blueprint that is only responsible for setting up development environments, for setting up AWS accounts within your project, and to set up the roles and permissions that are able to access the project. This can be done with a blueprint. You can then have a second blueprint that sets up all of your source repositories. Then you can have a blueprint that sets up the workflows within a repository. Now, you can also have a blueprint that sets up everything, which makes it complex, as I already said, but you can also have blueprints that only add specific workflows. Think of the use case of having a security team that wants to do specific verifications on the source code that is produced. They can build this custom blueprint, and you as a user, you will be able to apply that to your project. Then you can also use that going forward to have additional verifications when doing deployments and stuff like that. So this sounds very complicated from my perspective. So I decided let's, instead of just look at this diagram, let's look at something that I can build and that I can give to you as an input on how you could leverage to build blueprints. So here's what I looked at. I wanted to build a blueprint that starts with that blueprint master. Then I decided to implement 3 different blueprints. And with that, we're going to have one project at the end. I have one blueprint which is going to be focused on having an API gateway, so the master piece of the API gateway being implemented and being added to the source code. assuming that this will be TypeScript, it will have a Lambda function behind that API gateway, and it will have a package JSON, and it will be written in CDK. This blueprint will be added once to our project. I can then build a blueprint that will add an additional API gateway. And well, here we need to watch out. This is not an API gateway itself. This is an API gateway path that we're building. So what this means is initially we will have an API gateway that doesn't have any path. Then we can add a path. And now as a different team or as a new team is building out a new path in the blueprint, in that API gateway. Let's say I want to get accounts, and I want to get users, and I want to get credits, right, as 3 different paths. I can now add this blueprint multiple times to the project. And this empowers me to make sure that within the blueprint, I define all of the standards that I have for this path, like course setup, maybe encryption, maybe connectivity. And they are all put into the project at the same time. I'm going to show how that works as well a little bit later. And then last but not least, I have my security team. This security team wants to ensure that there is a dedicated workflow that is executed before we actually deploy our stuff out. So they are going to introduce a mandatory workflow that needs to be executed, and that needs to be green before actually a deployment can happen successfully. So from an architecture perspective, how does this look like? The blueprint. The main API blueprint is going to add an API gateway, it's going to add an endpoint, and it's going to add a Lambda function that shows some info stuff. It's going to add some workflows that actually triggers the deployment later. We have the security team blueprint that will add workflows to verify the security posture of our source code. And we have a sub API blueprint, which can be added multiple times, that now has the possibility to have a path or an endpoint added to the existing API gateway. And besides that, the user can now choose between having a Lambda integration or having a DynamoDB integration. Once again, there's going to be additional workflows added over here to ensure that the code that is added is also verified and tested as adding this to the project. This is already really complicated. I've managed to get this kind of implemented, and I hope that I will be able to walk you through some pieces of that code as well going forward. So if you're now excited to look at the code, I'm going to let you wait for 1 or 2 more minutes because I'm going to record this as a separate video as well. But before we do that, let's have a short look on how the project setup now looks like. So I'm now in my From API Blueprint project, which is actually, going back to this video, to this picture, is this green project. I've now added this main API blueprint, I've added the API blueprint gateway, and I've added the security blueprint. As you can see, in my project, the 3 of them are added. We have the main one, we have the API one, and we have a blueprint for the security team. What I'm going to try now is I'm going to try to add an additional version of the API and see if this actually builds out a new path. So let's do that. We go to Space Blueprints because that's where we already have the blueprints added. You see I did a few changes like 2 hours ago. Let's go to select that additional API blueprint. Now this will generate my code and will show me the different options that I've added to my corresponding wizard. Here's a generated main API ID. This is right now not really working, but here I can add a new path that I want to add actually to my project. So let's call that Misfits. Okay, so now we will see that as soon as I change this one, the code changes are going to be generated that will be applied to my project. So this means it's going to change existing MD files. This is not perfect yet, right? It's going to change this added blueprint stuff. It's going to create a new workflow that actually has this misfits in it. It's going to create a new stack that has this misfits in it as well, right? It has the path over here. It is adding that path and it's using that sub API construct. It's then going to override an existing API construct that is already there. This is something that I might need to change as well going forward. And it's going to add a lambda function that is called misfits lambda, which is actually being referred to in our blueprint itself. Cool. So it looks like this worked, right? So let's do apply blueprint and let's see how this changes our source code in the project. Okay, now this is the existing API that we already had. This is now our misfits thing that we added. I'm going to see if I can edit this one to make it available, right? So I can add an alias here. Let's add misfits path, right? So this gives me the possibility to now see the difference between these two blueprints that have been added over here, right? Because it's the same blueprint, but it has different input parameters. You can see that there has been a pull request created, and this is the way that you can update and also add new blueprint structures to your existing projects. You will now see that this is really the same way that we have a pull request. In a normal way, if I would open that manually, it also once again will show the changed code. As you can see over here, there is some stuff that I still need to understand, right? This is not intended. I would not expect this to be existing or proposed. I would just expect this line to be added over here, because now in this project, I've been applying 3 different blueprints, and this is what I want to see over here. Same for the README. I don't know why this is existing and proposed, but I'm sure that I will find out how to resolve that as well going forward. So with that, I'm going to merge this one, and my source code will be updated for this project. And also I will hopefully see that there's new workflows being added to this one. So let's have a look. Now let's see if we go to workflows now, and if we focus on the main branch for this repository, we will now see that we have a sub workflow for misfits. We have that security workflow, which just triggered because we pushed to main. We have the sub workflow for the details, which is the other path that I've added. And we have the main workflow. Oh, that had this an error, so I need to go back and fix my workflow over here. And we also have a main PR workflow that has an error here as well. And I also need to update that. That's the introduction to the project that we're building. Now this is interesting, but it does not give you any code. So I'm gonna stop the recording here and let you wait for a few minutes until you hit the next session, which will dive deep into how are these different blueprint projects set up, and how we can maybe also learn from that to enforce that this security workflow is always the active one. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you learned a lot today in this short video, and that you give it a like, and also maybe subscribe to the channel to the playlist for the future updates that I'll be adding to this soon. Thank you so much. Bye bye.